Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. You're here with us today because, well, you're clearly interested in like the inner workings of youth sports, right? And today we're diving deep into a world that is well known for its competitive spirit, Little League All-Stars.
Yeah, for sure.
You sent over this super interesting information from the Northeast Little League All-Stars program. And honestly, I gotta say, our mission today is to like peel back the layers, go beyond the surface, and really understand, the structure, the selection process, and like that core competitive drive that fuels this whole thing.
Right, exactly. And it's really cool that we have access to this, local programs guide.
Yeah.
It's really behind the scenes look at how intense and how much dedication goes into this program.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to break it all down from like the way the tournament is structured, all the way to the commitment that it demands, and even like the differences in playing time compared to like regular season games. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, it really is. So let's start with that, right? Let's talk about the tournament structure itself, because it doesn't seem like they just like add a few extra games to the regular season, right? This is a whole different level of competition.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating how Little League International has set up this really well-defined tiered system for their tournaments.
Yeah.
And they cover a really wide range of ages, starting at 8 and going all the way up to 16.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So for the younger players, like the 8 to 10 and the 9 to 11 age groups, their journey kind of peaks at the state level. But then you have the Little League division, the Intermediate 50-70, Junior League, and Senior League. And those have the potential to go all the way to a World Series.
Wow.
It's like a step-by-step pathway, the stakes getting higher at each level.
Wow, that sounds intense.
It is.
So for those kids who are really, really into baseball, this is a real chance to experience some serious high-stakes competition with, real opportunities to advance.
Yeah, exactly.
And, the document actually is a really cool example of this with the Northeast Little League 10U team's performance in 2022. They had a pretty impressive run.
They did. It's a great example of just how competitive it can get.
Yeah.
They had to win their district tournament, then go through the sectionals, and then they actually won the Florida State tournament, which is huge.
Wow.
And that win propelled them to the Southeast Regional Championship in North Carolina. It's a journey that involves so many high-pressure games against some really talented teams, and it really highlights the intensity of the competition they had to overcome at each stage just to keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's incredible. And, it's interesting to see how the leagues themselves are actually invested in how their teams perform, like financially. Even they pay an entry fee, right? Which kind of implies that they're serious about putting together teams that can compete.
Absolutely. I think that's a really smart observation. It adds another layer of investment and maybe even an extra incentive for leagues to, really support their all-star teams and make sure they're as competitive as they can be.
Right.
And, if a team does well and progresses through the tournaments, getting those fees refunded can really help offset the costs that come with playing at such a high level.
Right, of course.
So it further reinforces the league's commitment to this more intense and competitive style of play.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about how these all-star teams, these powerhouse teams actually come together, because it's not just like everyone who raises their hand gets a spot, right? There's a whole selection process that in itself already creates a competitive atmosphere just to make the team.
Absolutely. And, the document lays out all the different age-based teams at Northeast Little League, and they typically range from 9U all the way up to the 12U Little League team.
Okay.
And what's really important to understand about this whole competitive aspect is the level of experience that players typically have from the regular season, before they even get to the All-Stars.
Makes sense.
So for the 9U team, which they interestingly call an introduction to All-Stars, the players often come from the AAA level. So that suggests that the environment might be a little less fiercely competitive compared to the older groups.
Yeah, like a stepping stone almost.
Exactly. A way to ease those younger players into this whole next level competition.
Right, but for the 10U and older teams, it seems like the expectation for prior competitive experience is really, really high.
Oh, yeah, absolutely for 10U. And the guide specifically mentions that prior experience at the AAA or even majors level is generally expected.
Wow, okay.
So, right away, that signals the higher level of skill and experience in those more competitive regular season games.
Yeah.
It sets the stage for a much more intense and competitive tryout and selection process.
Right, of course.
And it's interesting because while the broader Little League organization includes ages up to 16 Northeast, Little League's focus seems to be primarily on those younger age groups, typically up to 12.
I see.
So it really concentrates that competitive energy within those specific divisions.
Okay, so it's not just about having played at a certain level. There are actual eligibility rules that players have to meet, right? Just to even be considered for these competitive teams. It's not as simple as just signing up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And these rules really highlight how serious and competitive this program is. So players need to have participated in AA or above within Northeast Little League and played in at least 8 regular season games, with a specific exception for seniors.
Oh, okay.
But the really crucial part is the need for proof of age and residence, which is then verified by Little League International.
Oh, wow.
It really emphasizes that this competition is official and regulated.
Right.
They're making sure everyone is playing on a level playing field and that there are no unfair advantages, which is, absolutely essential for maintaining the integrity of the competition.
Right. Okay. So you've got to be eligible. You've got to have proven yourself in a competitive regular season environment. But the document also makes it clear that being part of an all-star team requires a massive commitment, right? They even have players sign a letter acknowledging this, which tells you a lot about the level of dedication they're looking for.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Mm-hmm. The guide doesn't shy away from it. They use the word big to describe the commitment, and having players sign a letter at registration shows how seriously they take it.
Wow.
The reason is pretty clear. They want to be absolutely sure that every player who gets selected is fully dedicated to the team and their competitive goals. They don't want a situation where a spot goes to someone who's not totally committed when it could have gone to someone who is.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And when they say big commitment, they really mean it. The details really show how demanding the schedule is. It's all geared towards achieving that peak competitive performance.
Right.
We're talking about practices that could be 5 days a week for 2 to 3 hours each. And that starts way back in May.
Oh, wow.
Plus, they have these weekend pre-tournaments leading up to the district tournament. It's like a really serious training regimen.
Yeah, for sure. And the time frame they lay out from May 16th to July 15th, with the possibility of it going even longer for teams that advance. Yeah. That really emphasizes the commitment they're asking for.
Right.
The expectation is that you're at every game, every practice. This isn't just about showing up when you feel like, this is a significant chunk of your summer dedicated to intense training and competitive baseball, and that reflects the high stakes of this whole endeavor.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just the athletes who are making that commitment, it's the parents too. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're heavily involved, and the guide frames it as a separate opportunity, beyond the regular season. So there's a whole new set of expectations and demands that come with it.
Right, it's a whole separate thing.
Exactly. And that distinction is important because it clarifies that All-Stars is an additional layer of competitive baseball on top of the typical Little League experience.
Makes sense.
And with that higher level of competition come more responsibilities for the parents or guardians.
Right, of course.
There are costs for uniforms, and while the league might cover the basic hat and jersey, there could be other expenses, like equipment upgrades, additional uniform items for different stages of the tournament, team photos to remember their journey by, or even team gatherings to, build that team spirit and camaraderie before the competition gets really intense.
Right.
So there's a definite financial commitment on top of the huge time commitment.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the logistics, getting everyone where they need to be.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They're responsible for all the transportation to and from these practices and games, and that could mean traveling to different districts or even states if the team keeps advancing.
Exactly.
So that can really add up in terms of time, effort, and money. It just shows how committed everyone involved has to be.
It really does. It emphasizes that being a part of All-Stars is often a family commitment. It takes everyone working together to support a young athlete who's trying to excel in a more competitive environment.
Okay, so let's get to the real nitty-gritty of the competition here, because the rules around playing time in these tournaments are very different from the regular season, and that has a big impact on how the players experience this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting, and it really underscores that shift in focus towards winning and strategic competition. So in tournament play with a 12-player team, there's a minimum play requirement, a continuous batting order where everyone who's present at the start of the game gets a chance to bat.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this is really important to understand, the playing time beyond that minimum is not required.
Oh, wow. Okay, so just because you made the team, which is already a huge accomplishment, doesn't mean you're guaranteed a certain amount of time on the field, unlike the regular season, where they might try to give everyone equal playing time so they can develop their skills.
It's exactly, the document is very specific about this. It says playing time exceeding these minimums is not required. And that's a huge difference from recreational play, where the focus is on letting everyone try different positions and improve.
Yeah.
And there's even a direct quote in the guide that I think really sums it up. It says, the All-Stars competition is extremely competitive.
Wow.
And that really makes it clear that the main goal is to field the best possible team to win each game.
So it's all about strategy.
Yeah.
And this even applies to the positions players play, right? Even if a player was amazing at a certain position during the regular season, they might find themselves playing somewhere else in the high-pressure world of All-Stars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The manager has the power to decide where each player will be most effective, in order to give the team the best chance of winning.
Okay.
So you could have a player who is a star shortstop during the regular season, but in All-Stars, they might find themselves in a different position, maybe one they're not as familiar with, if the manager thinks that's what will make the team stronger overall. It just shows how important it is to have the most competitive team out there, even if meets players have to step outside their comfort zones.
So how do they actually choose who gets these coveted spots on the All-Star teams? These highly competitive rosters. It can't be random, right? There must be a system in place to pick the best players.
Oh no, it's definitely not random. The selection process is all about merit. And they have a structured voting system.
Okay.
So the managers and coaches from the AAA and majors levels are the ones who vote for the players they think deserve to be on the All-Star team.
Okay.
And this peer evaluation adds a whole other level of competition, during the regular season.
Yeah.
Because players are trying to impress those coaches who are going to be voting.
Right. They got to stand out.
Exactly. And there's a cool system to identify the players who are clearly seen as top talent. So any player who gets votes from all of the voting managers automatically makes the team.
Wow.
That means there's a strong consensus that they're incredibly talented, skilled, and that they made a big impact during the regular season. But then for the rest of the roster spots, the selection gets even more competitive.
Yeah.
Those spots are filled based on a combination of how well they did in the regular season, which shows their competitive abilities and other factors.
Okay.
And those other factors probably include things like their attitude, how well they take coaching, and that inner drive to compete that we've been talking about.
Right.
So it's a more well-rounded assessment. It goes beyond just the numbers.
Okay, so for the players who make it through that competitive selection process and earn a spot on the team, there's still some paperwork to do right to make sure they're officially eligible for this higher level of competition.
Yeah, exactly. If a player is selected for the All-Stars team, they have to provide official documents like proof of residency or school attendance and a birth certificate.
Okay.
It just reinforces that this is an official tournament run by Little League International, and they're super thorough about verifying each player's eligibility to make sure everything is fair and that the competition maintains its integrity at every level.
So to sum it all up, our deep dive into the Northeast Little League All-Stars program really paints a clear picture of a highly competitive environment, and that competitive spirit is woven into every aspect of the program. From the way the tournament is structured with that goal of reaching higher and higher levels of competition, to the way teams are formed, prioritizing players with proven skills and experience, to the demanding commitment it asks of both players and their families, to the strategic approach to playing time where winning is the focus. And even to that merit-based selection process, it's clear that competition is at the heart of this whole program.
I couldn't agree more. You see that emphasis on competition everywhere you look in the tiered tournament structure, with that ultimate goal of the World Series, in the rigorous selection process for building teams that are all about talent, and the intensity of the training schedule that prepares them for those high-stakes games, in the playing time rules that are all about winning, and in the selection process that rewards players who have proven their competitive ability. It's undeniably a serious and competitive journey for these young athletes.
Yeah, and, seeing this level of competition at such a young age really makes you think about the impact it might have on these players, as they grow and develop, both on and off the field, whether they win or lose.
It really does. It raises some important questions about what values and lessons are learned in such a selective and high-pressure environment.
Absolutely. So, considering how intense and selective the All-Stars program is, what do you think is the most valuable lesson a young athlete takes away from this experience? Regardless of the final score, what's the lasting impact of this deep dive into competitive youth sports?
That's a great question. And I think it's something worth thinking about long after we're done here, because it's not just about wins and losses. It's about the bigger picture.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for joining me on the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.
Yeah, see you later.
Okay, bye.